for inviting me here today. What we've been trying to do over the last month or so is to get out to the community as best we can to explain what is a rather complicated recommendation. We've been working on what should be the future water source for Flint for maybe 7 or 8 months. And over the last month or so, we've kind of pulled everything together here. We took a look at a number of alternatives here. What I'd like to do is briefly talk about the alternatives we looked at and why the mayor has picked the alternative that she has, which is basically staying on Great Lakes water with using Genesee County water as a backup. I'd like to do a relatively brief presentation. I've done a number of these, and I find that the questions actually help me more because I want to find out what's on your mind and specifically answer the questions that you have. So hopefully I can answer some of them in the presentation, but I'm more interested in answering directly what's on your mind and what your major concerns. So let me just go through things relatively quickly here, and then I'll just open it up for questions. Is that okay, Walter?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My friend. Okay. When we started this process here, and when you start any evaluation process, you have to figure out what alternatives you actually have. And we were getting water from Great Lakes water ever since the water crisis occurred. We turned off the treatment plant. On an emergency basis, Great Lakes water supplied the city of Flint water. So we were looking at what are the alternatives for the future long-term supply. Well, there's really 2 alternatives and possibly a third. The first alternative is we can go in and fire up our current treatment plant, determine what improvements are needed, and then bring water from the KWA Lake Huron, raw water, to that plant, treat it, and distribute that to the residents of Flint. We would need a backup supply as well, but that would be our primary supply, the existing filter plant with some improvements. The second would be buying water from Genesee County. They all are also bringing water in from the KWA, the same raw water authority. They're building their plant. Their plant ought to be online by October of this year, and we can buy water from them. One of the challenges we have there is the plant that they're building doesn't have enough capacity initially to serve both the city of Flint and the Genesee County customers. Over time, they could increase that capacity, but short term, there's some challenges there. The third one is obviously stay on Great Lakes water. So why do I have it up there as a question? Well, and I promise you this is the first and last detailed schematic I will have in this presentation. But if you look at the, let me get up here. If you look at this slide here, we currently get water from Great Lakes Water Authority from a pump station they have, and this line here is about 20 miles long. It goes from a pump station, 20 miles of a 72-inch line to a meter vault, and then there's about another 10 miles or so of pipe from that meter vault that bring water to the city of Flint. You may remember that a number of years ago, under the emergency manager, and when we decided to go to KWA, we sold this length of pipe to Genesee County. And Genesee County was going to use this piece of pipe to be the hub or the main pipe in their distribution system. So what happens is in October, when Genesee County fires up their treatment plant, they own this pipe, and they would put their water, Genesee County water, into this pipe. Okay? And once they do that, we don't have access to Great Lakes water. So the first thing that we needed to determine is what could we do to at least have all 3 alternatives: the treatment plant, Genesee County, and the alternative to stay on Great Lakes water. And what we were able to do early on in negotiations is convince Genesee County, with some money being thrown in by the state of Michigan, to run a parallel pipeline to the 72-inch line to be the hub of their system in the future, to allow us to continue to use the 72-inch pipe, either on an interim or long-term basis, to keep water flowing in from Great Lakes water. And they agreed to do that. And that pipe, right now, they're starting construction of that facility. Now that construction will not continue unless the total plan is approved, but that's in the plan. So what criteria did we use? Now that we have three alternatives, the Flint treatment plant, Genesee County plant, and Great Lakes Water, how do we decide which was the best alternative? Well, there's four things we looked at. Number one, 1A and 1B, the most important thing is public health protection. No question about that. We don't want to happen what happened before or anything like happened before. So that's number one. Right below that, pretty close below that, is cost. Obviously, the lowest cost project will have the lowest rate impact, or the best rate impact, keeping rates as low as possible. So as low as we can keep the cost, we can minimize the rate impact. Third is reliability. We want to make sure that after we spend the money we need to spend for the long-term water source, that we have enough water to serve us both now and in the future. And fourth is how quickly can this project be implemented. So kind of in priority, they're the four things we looked at when determining what was the best project. Okay, so let's take them one at a time. The Flint water treatment plant. The plant that we have right now was designed to treat water from the Flint River. And the Flint River requires us to soften the water. The supply that we're getting from Lake Huron does not require softening, it requires different types of treatment. So because of the change in how we treat the water, as well as the age of the Flint treatment plant, substantial costs would be associated with renovating that facility. We brought in a number of international experts to look at this, and overall the recommendation is we would need to do a $58 million project to get the plant where we needed to from both a water quality and reliability perspective, and it would take about 3 years to build that project. Another component of that project potentially could be a large raw water storage basin at the treatment plant site. So if we had a break in the pipe that brings raw water from Lake Huron, we could actually use water out of that storage reservoir while we fix the break. So if we didn't have another source of reliable supply, we'd have to put another $50 million in for raw water storage. So that's the cost of doing the Flint water treatment plant improvements. So on top of that, we would obviously continue to pay our bond obligation, which is about $7 million a year, to KWA for all the facilities that have been built to deliver water from Lake Huron. Okay, so let's talk about Great Lakes Water. What do we currently pay for water? Well, right now, because we have an emergency agreement, we don't have a long-term contract with Great Lakes Water. They came in on an emergency basis to buy the 12 to 13 million gallons a day on an annual basis. We pay about $14.1 million a year. Okay. On top of that, we had to build all those facilities in our partnership with Genesee County to bring water from Lake Huron to close to the Flint treatment plant. We're still probably about 3 miles away from it. And the cost of that, the cost of the bond obligation is about $7 million a year. So right now, if we were to take a look at the Flint Water Department budget for next year, given the status quo, you'd see $21.1 million associated with water source. Now, we're not using that $7 million that brings for the KWA. We're not using that water. That's for raw water that we're currently not using, but would use in the future if we were to renovate the Flint water plant. So given those costs, it was not cost effective to stay on Great Lakes Water. It was more cost effective to renovate the treatment plant, or even potentially buy water from Genesee County, although initially they don't have enough water to meet our current needs. But we wanted to keep Great Lakes Water in as an option because from a public health perspective, and you talked about any public health official, you talked to DEQ, you talked to EPA, they were encouraging us, if any way you can stay on Great Lakes Water, stay on it, because we don't want to change the water that our pipes are exposed to. You can imagine when the crisis occurred and this corrosive water went into the system, it basically stripped linings of the pipes, both the protective coating for lead service lines, but also impacted the larger pipes within the system. What we've been doing since then is we've been kind of elevating the amount of chemicals or phosphate that we add to the water to rebuild this coating. But it's not a very mature coating. It's only had a year or so to build up, and not a long period of time. So if you have another water quality change, it could impact the chemistry that goes on within the pipes and potentially impact that coating, and you could have some water quality issues again. So that's why all the public health officials and EPA and DEQ were recommending, let's not change source again. Let's see if we can stay on the same source. My challenge was, I totally agree with you, but if it's going to make rates go up substantially, that may not work, and that's when you have to start balancing rates versus public health. I don't like to get in that situation because in my case, public health always rules, but if you can make them both optimal, then you've done a lot. So we got to negotiating with Great Lakes Water. And what they said they would do for the city is we could reduce this $21.1 million that we're spending on water right now and get it down to $12.2 million. Well, how does that happen? Well, first of all, as I said earlier on, we're under an emergency contract with Great Lakes Water. They serve us on a year-by-year basis. So it's costing us $14 million a year for water. However, if we sign up for a longer-term contract, which is a 30-year contract, which all the rest of their customers have the same 30-year contract, they can give us a reduced price. And that reduced price would be $11.1 million for the same amount of water if we go under a 30-year contract. Additionally, we need a backup supply. Right now, Flint does not have a backup supply. If we had a break in that 72-inch line that comes to the city, we have water in our storage tanks. And once those storage tanks goes away, we're out of water. So it's a good practice and it's required by DEQ to have a backup supply. And so that backup supply would come from off the Genesee County system into Flint, and that could cost us another $1.1 million for that backup supply. But the combination of those two equals $12.2 million. So why does the KWA debt service go away? Well, what we try to do is convince Great Lakes Water is if they picked up our $7 million a year debt service, we'd be willing to give them access to the water rights that we have for the KWA water. And they thought about it for a while, and they said, well, maybe we will want to pick up that $7 million. So why would Great Lakes Water want to pay us $7 million for those water rights? Well, a number of reasons. First of all, Flint is about 5% of their revenue. It's a large customer, and they didn't want to lose a large customer. That was one reason. Secondly, if Flint goes off the system, the flows in that large 72-inch line go down to very, very low flows, and the water stays in the pipe for a very, very long time, serving other customers that Great Lakes Water has in this area, which means they have to put additional facilities in to retreat the water to maintain the water quality. So if Flint stays on the system, they can avoid some capital projects in the future. Third, their customers that are out here from Great Lakes Water are very similar to Flint. They don't have a backup. And if we would give them access to the water rights from KWA, they could have that water treated at the Genesee County plant and used as a backup for their customers. And that was a very cost-effective way for them to provide a backup supply. And then there were some other reciprocal agreements. So if you add all that up, Great Lakes Water made the business decision that we'll pick up the $7 million a year of the bond obligation that Flint has and reduce the cost from $21 million down to $12 million a year. You can't read this slide, but this was actually handed out at the press conference when the mayor made her announcement. This is 12 different options we looked at for short-term and long-term supply for the city of Flint. That included combinations of the Flint treatment plant, Genesee County, and Great Lakes Water in various iterations. And it's a 20-year net present value analysis. So what it does is you look at all the costs for that alternative over a 20-year period, bring it back to present worth, and compare the projects. And when we did that, project number 4, which is using Great Lakes Water as the primary supply with the lower cost that we now negotiated, and using Genesee County as the backup, became the most attractive project from both a public health perspective, a cost perspective, a reliability perspective, and from an implementation time. So, from all 4 factors, it became the most attractive project. So specifically, what are the advantages of what is being recommended now as the water source? Well, there are a number of advantages to Flint. First of all, we don't change water source. We keep status quo with the Great Lakes Water. We don't have any of the public health risks of changing water supply. Secondly, it's the lowest cost option, both short-term and long-term. Third, as you might have read in the newspaper or seen other places, the federal government has given the state $100 million for work in Flint that the state can distribute through their drinking water revolving fund. Plus the state has matched that with another $20 million. So there's $120 million out there. If we were to do the treatment plant option, we could take some of that money, a large portion of that money, and rebuild the treatment plant. However, if we implement the mayor's recommendation on water source to stay with Great Lakes, all of that money can go to support pipes within the Flint system. And believe me, those pipes need a lot of work, both the lead service lines as well as the main transmission mains and small mains within the system. So we're able to use the money where we best need it and not necessarily on the treatment plant. Part of the deal, that 72-inch line that I talked about earlier on that we sold to Genesee County under the emergency manager for $3.9 million, we're getting that pipeline back for nothing. We get rid of the 28 years of $7 million bond obligation that we had for the KWA. LEWA is picking up that, Great Lakes Water is picking up that. Obviously, we're staying on the same supply, but there's no implementation time at all. We don't even have to open a valve. We can stay with what we're doing. We go from $14 million a year down to $11 million a year under the new LEWA contract, which is savings. Great Lakes Water, when it was formed 3 years ago, the charter said 1/2% of all the income would go to a low-income assistance program. And it's divided up by county. And Flint is the only customer within Genesee County that Great Lakes Water serves right now. So we would get access to all of the funds to support a low-income program. And I think that program impacts all customers, I think 150% of the poverty level and below. And that would be in addition to the current programs that the city of Flint is running. One of the major concerns that I had, and I think everybody has, is if we sign a long-term contract with Great Lakes Water, does that mean we're kind of at the mercy they can do whatever they want to do with respect to long-term pricing? Detroit Water and Sewer screwed us over. There's no question about it. We have what I call the tail wagging the dog. We had 600,000 people in Detroit deciding what the pricing of water was going to be for 3 million people who were their wholesale customers. That didn't work. Everybody recognized it didn't work. It was one of the main reasons that the Great Lakes Water Authority was formed. Now the wholesale customers, which are the majority of the customers, are the dog wagging the tail a little bit. When they formed the Great Lakes Water Authority, obviously everybody was concerned about rates and rate control, so there was a memorandum of understanding that was developed that has to be observed by the legal board that says revenue requirements, which is essentially rates, it's not the exact same thing, can't go up any more than 4% a year. And they've held to that the first 3 years of operation. In fact, they've been well below that the first 3 years of operations. We've done a lot of due diligence. They've reduced operating costs by $80 million. They've reduced some of their bond obligations. It's a different animal than Detroit Water and Sewer, and they're getting better. So, can we guarantee what a water is going to cost 25 years from now? No. All we can do is say, what they've done in the last 3 or 4 years looks nothing like Detroit Water and Sewer, and the plans that they have going forward should keep costs of water reasonable. We would now have a backup source. We don't have that right now with the new plan. And we're hoping, as you all might remember, we had a very large industrial customer in town that went off of Flint water when the corrosion happened. And they've continued to stay off of Flint water, and that revenue is not coming into us right now. We are hoping that if we stay on Great Lakes Water, make a commitment to do that, that large industrial customer will come back in. There's no guarantee of that, but I can tell you right now that if we switch water sources, that will never happen. So that's another big advantage of a revenue source coming in the city. So where are we right now? Well, we spent the last couple months getting public feedback on the plan. We're also undertaking a rate study right now, determining with a new water source what would be the impact of rates. We know that if we stay with the status quo, I hate to say this, but there should be around a 47% rate increase implemented immediately because of that $21 million that we're spending. If we go to the new water source, we're working out what would be the rates. and we're hoping that we can keep them, keep them flat. It'd be pretty close to being flat, at least for the first couple of years. Don't know the answers right now, but we'll get those soon. And I'll be honest with you, unfortunately, the rates are really driven by our collection rates. And I fully understand that given the water quality in this community, why people may not be willing to pay for it. And I also understand because of the economic conditions within this community, they may not be able to pay for it. But you need to understand that if your neighbors, if the neighbor's not paying for the water, then unfortunately somebody has to pay for it. So collection rates the rates are very, very sensitive to the overall collection rates within the community. So we're working on that as well. We finalized all the agreements. This is very, very complex. We have 5 or 6 agreements. We have an agreement between Great Lakes Water and Flint. We have an agreement agreements between Great Lakes Water and Genesee County, agreements between the state and Flint. There's 5 or 6 parties involved in a lot of different agreements, and unfortunately a lot of lawyers involved with this. Now the agreements are in place, we need to obtain approvals, and you can see from the slide there how many different types of approvals we need to achieve. And once an approval is achieved, we will begin constructing the projects associated with this. There's about the lead service line replacement project, which is where we're replacing 18,000 lead service lines over the next 3 years. The cost of that is about $135 million. All that money is being financed through either this money coming down from the federal government or other grant water sources. And then we have about another $80 million that we should spend on things like new meters within the home, replacing some of the pipes, replacing some of the pumping stations, things like that. It's been a long time since money's been invested within the Flint water system. And these are all the partners that were involved in the agreements that were just put together and need to be approved by the various bodies over the next month or so. So that's a very high-level review of the options that we looked at. It's been a long process here, and we've had a lot of people involved in it. And one of the challenges that we had, and like I said, this presentation is like 60,000 feet. Sorry. When you get down to like 5,000 feet, it's very complicated. We want the public to be totally informed, and we've been trying the best we can to make very complex agreements as simple as possible. But if you want to get down to 5,000 feet and really understand the details, we're willing to answer any questions that you may have. So why don't I just at this point just open it up for questions and see what you have.
Here's the thing I'm having the problem with. Everyone keeps saying that this is the best deal that we can do, and our own treatment plant, I understand the health concerns, switching water, recoding, and I get all of that, I understand that. But when the mayor and others were going to the state and to the federal government to get financing to help repair the system for the damage, and I'm not assigning blame by anybody, but it was said, we need X number of dollars because our system was damaged. The state and the federal government, some charities and others said, fine, here's some money, fix your system. The mayor, when she campaigned, that was on, we don't want to have less control over our water system and our destiny through either, at the time, DWSD, state, whatever. We want to control our own destiny. Fine, and she's elected, she's in. Now she's saying, well, we're going back to the same people who we were under control over. So if we can go to get X number of dollars to repair the system, make Flint independent, let's take the time. I'm sure, in her press conference, she said, if we don't do this Monday, the 26th, City Council doesn't do it, there's going to be consequences. And I asked her, what consequences? Will Detroit or the state shut the water off? Well, of course not. Continue the emergency water service, spend the time, effort, and money, and find qualified people, because one of the conditions in the letter from DEQ was you don't have F1 qualified, and I think another qualification. Well, go get them. there's somebody in this country that can do that. Find people, you have money to do this stuff. Find the people that can run the plant, build the plant, do whatever you need to do with the pipeline, with KWA, all this stuff. Make Flint independent. If it takes another $100 million, it can be gotten just like this original money was. People, politicians, our politicians are not going to say no when they know that their political interest is at stake. That's what happened when she went to Washington on several occasions, went to Lansing. All these people know that this stuff can get done. Get it done. And if it takes another year or 2 years to get this plant up and running, fine. Get people in here that can check the quality of the water, get it done, make Flint self-sufficient, let us control our rates, let us control what happens to us, not 30 years down the road, because you yourself have said on 2 separate occasions that we don't know what's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years out with rates and whatever.
That, yes.
So so then if there is a problem, we can do it in-house. We don't have.
You can't do guarantee either.
I understand that, but if there is a problem, it's easier solved going right over here than driving 90 miles to Detroit and fighting with those people and the state agency and everybody else that's going to have a part in it. Let us do it here. That's what she ran on. That's what she promised. That's what makes sense. And if it takes another year or 2 years, so be it. The money can be found, just like this was found a few months ago when everybody's saying we need this money. She's made several cases to every politician up and down the pike, give me this money, it's here, so let's take care of ourselves. This is nonsense to me, and anybody who thinks clearly and understands that, yeah, there's risk, whatever, there's risk going with Gliwa. So let us, at least if we take the risk, let us take our own risk, and if there's a problem, we can solve it over here, not down 60 miles down I-75.
Well, I mean, your assumptions are, one, that we can find the money.
It can be found. You know it as well as I do.
That's an assumption. We have $100 million, $120 million to play with, of which $40 million is already allocated to lead service line.
That's fine.
We have $80 million to start repairing the system. And frankly, we need more than that to repair the system. And that doesn't even get into the cost of the treatment plant. Secondly, you assume that we can find qualified operators to run that treatment plant, which right now we can't prove to the state or the federal government.
Because nobody's taken the effort to do it. They've been fixated on this deal. She kept city council out of it. She's fixated on this deal and hasn't put the effort in like a city manager or mayor should do and put the time and effort into finding the people. There's 300 million people in the United States and more than 1 billion around the world. Somebody can do this. They can be found if you guys would put the effort into it.
There are people, I've hired hundreds of them over my career. Whether we get to come to Flint,
that's my point.
And third, you're assuming that if you have control, that you can do things more efficiently. And you may be able to, but in general, economies of scale and expertise of scale, the larger you are, the more efficient you can be.
Not necessarily.
Not in all cases, but in general that is true. And again, you may want to have, if you want your control, you can get your control, but you may have to pay for that control.
That's fine. The citizens of Flint are willing to take those risks because of how we got here in the first place. It was, and you know as well as anyone, it was DWSD holding your contracts expired, pay this rate. Flint couldn't afford it. We were under emergency management at the time because of finances and whatnot. Hopefully we've learned, but we're going right back to where we were.
This is, well, you were, we wouldn't be recommending this. You're not going back to Detroit Water and Sewer. You're going back to a different entity.
It's the same thing. We have no control. The problem before was lack of control locally. We were at the mercy of DWSD. Now we're going to be at the mercy of GLWA. It's the same people, just different name, couple little things around the fringes. But the key is we have absolutely no control over what happens when we go with this GLWA deal. That's the problem. See, that's the problem. They could do whatever they decide to do at some point, whether we're on the board or not, and the citizens are going to be the ones bearing the cost. That's the problem that people have that I talk to as I go around the city. It's not so much that we don't trust them to keep the water safe or somebody coming in from, that's not the point, it's the control. And the water rate study, the mayor said at the town hall at House of Prayer, a 60-day study. That expired on the 18th. She still doesn't know. Tuesday, she said, we still don't know, and there's 2 boards looking at the rates before they can even come to a consensus on what that's going to be. The next question to her was, so council has to vote on something, and they don't know the cost. She goes, yeah, that's the deal. That's what she said. Well, that's kind of silly. Go buy a car and ask the dealer, how much does it cost? I don't know, just sign it, buy it. I'll tell you after you drive off the lot. That's what people are asking the citizens of the city to do with this GLWA deal. Nobody knows what it's going to be. Get it done. The state's threatening city council to do this by Tuesday. Well, I'd like to call the state's bluff. We say no. What are you going to do? Shut the water off? No, they're not. What are you going to do? Sue the city? There's no money. Everybody says the city's broke. So now what? Give us time to get ourselves together. Hire people. There's money that can be found, just like they found this $120 million. There's hundreds of millions more. Let Flint do what it needs to do to take care of itself. It can be done. And these same agencies and all these people, if they're concerned about us, they'll help us. They're not concerned. GLWA makes out, everybody makes out like Arthur said, except the city of Flint. You say, well, we get the best deal. No, we don't, because we have no control. You can't have the best deal when you don't control it. That makes absolutely no sense.
There are 3 million people, other wholesale customers of Great Lakes who probably disagree with you. But
well, I'll disagree with them too on the same basis, and I would venture to say that nobody would just say, hey, take our assets, take this, that, and the other, and we'll just be happy, and whatever you do to us in the future is fine. If there were some more definites to this, perhaps I'd be convinced. But right now, it's too many. Well, what about this? Well, we don't know. We're looking at it. Well, before you pressure these guys into signing, get the thing done and say, this is what it is. These are the hardcore facts, so that when everybody votes or signs, they know exactly what they're signing. There's too many big questions, and the citizens in this city will tell you that doesn't make any sense. And all we're hearing is, well, we don't want to risk switching sources because the pipes and the coating. Well, we understand all of that because it was citizens who brought all this stuff to the light, and we understand exactly the coatings and the phosphates and the TTHMs and all that stuff. We're not silly, we're not stupid. I'm not saying you're calling us that, and please don't take it as such, but we understand this stuff. We want to take care of ourselves, and we think we can do it if the administration would put forth as much effort into this 7-8 months. She could do a personnel search and find people that would be willing to come in here and help this city get right, and the politicians would be more than happy to kick in because, one, politicians are politicians. They'd come out smelling like heroes, and the thing would get done. Then we could possibly be an asset to some of the people who don't have backup systems and whatnot. It can get done differently. This is being rushed through, and I'm not appreciating.
You read the letter that DEQ sent.
I certainly did.
City Council not too long ago.
Yep.
And you know in that letter that City Council has the option to approve
Right.
this plan or come forward with a different plan.
Right. And the answer to that question, which I asked, was, well, if they say no, then what? Well, Ms. Wheeler said, well, they're going to exercise their options. And that's when I said, what, shut the water off or sue the city? Because in the letter it says, I forget the code, but it says we're going to file a lawsuit. Well, what are you going to get? I mean, this is silly. That's a pressure tactic, trying to get these guys to vote for this thing Tuesday, so everybody can say, okay, we got it fixed, and not do the hard work. The hard work was not the 8 months you guys spent doing this. The hard work is making Flint self-sufficient, which is what she ran on. And you can go back and review every speech she made. We don't want to be under the thumb of these other people. We want to control this for ourselves. Well, you're getting ready to go right back. And we can do this on Dorton Stewart, KWA. That's what we went into, and that's how this whole thing got messed up, because Detroit was threatening to raise rates that we couldn't pay, and they knew it. Sue McCormick knew that. And they also knew Flint didn't have the money, even if we agreed to pay it. So let's not go back to being out of control again. That's the point. That's the whole point. We can get this done. There's money available in this country to get it done, just like there was to get this 120 or whatever else that's been coming in. We can get it done. She's not putting the effort into it because she's fixated on this just to say, hey, guess what I did? Well, that's not good enough, and that's not the promise she made.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I say something to that?
Sure, ma'am.
When we were discussing the options, and the first options that we were looking at and that we were fighting for, I will be honest, I'll just speak for myself, was autonomy and making sure that the treatment plant was able to be online and the city of Flint was able to treat its own water. One of the things that became a huge concern and became very apparent is that the first step to moving to treatment of the water was that we were going to have to be with the Genesee County, on the Genesee County system. And it became very apparent to us that then we would be going to a second switch to the city of Flint. And we were greatly concerned that that would never happen, that second step will never happen from a public health standpoint, but also what if we don't find the funding? What if we find out that the fix is to the treatment plant is unfixable? That was a very contentious point, that we did want autonomy, and that was the discussion that was happening in those rooms, that I can say, I'll speak for me and others, but I do want to put that out there because I hear that you're saying that wasn't a point, but it
No, I'm not saying it wasn't brought up, but I don't think.
No, that was our primary. That was the primary goal.
No,
I came on board. That was the plan.
I understand.
Unfortunately, we have a lot more facts now.
I understand. Nobody didn't think about it, but that's not what was promised by the current administration. That we would no longer be under the subjugation. That might be too strong of a word. Of someone else when we should be able to do this ourselves. And I understand there's the switch issue and you don't know what if, whatever, but the effort, again, to find the qualified people to do that and to oversee it and to get it done. It can be done. It's not impossible. And just like going with, there was a talk earlier on about not being able to go back to Detroit at the time, or Gleewell, whatever it was when the switch was made, but we ended up going back because people said, wait a minute, this isn't working what you're doing, switch back, now let's fix this, let's get it done. The will has to be there, the dollars are the easy part. It's the political will, and no, the dollars are always the easy part when it comes to politicians wanting to get something done, and when the citizens make the case, because the citizens of Flint is what made this whole thing, brought it to light, because the people who, DEQ and EPA and all those folks were trying to discount and dismiss us as we were saying, no, there's a problem here. No, it's not, whatever. And when there was one discovered, and everybody knows, they started covering up. That's why there's people under indictment. We know exactly what the risks are. We've lived them. Now we need people who have the authority to make these decisions, to exercise some will and say, look, we're not going to do that again. We will fight as hard as we can for the citizens in this city to get this done, and we will find whoever it takes to get it done. And I understand, ma'am, what you're saying about, and I don't mean to imply that nobody thought about it or talked about it, but it needs to be done. It needs to be as forcefully pressed. If DEQ can threaten city council with lawsuits and all this other nonsense, then they need to get, they were the ones who said everything was okay to pump the Flint River water through the plant before, while it was untreated, and they knew it was untreated. But now all of a sudden, well, you can't do that. Well, why didn't you say you couldn't do it before? You gave the green, not you, but DEQ gave the green light along with EPA to pump untreated Flint River water through the plant. Now they're saying, well, you need $80 million and 3.5 years to do it. It's not, you can't do it. Well, why didn't you say that then when you should have? Now it's time to say, your plant might not be ready, but here's what it's going to take to do it. They can get up off their behinds and help us find people. They can get this done if they want. They want to do this so they can say, okay, we helped you, we're out of here, and other people have other interests. Gets a new customer, sure, they want it done. But what about us? We're stuck with not knowing what the rates are going to be, what's going to happen 10, 15, 20 years down the road, all these unanswered questions. Well, I don't want to be bothered with that. I want to know what's happening with me right here. So if I got a problem, I can go right there. I don't want to drive to Detroit or Lansing or DC to try and find some EPA director.
Okay, thank you.